T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
It takes a shit scene.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
It takes a shit scene.
What is going on, everyone? JT Sports here, back at you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast, man. Got Monday Night Football reactions and thoughts. The Lions take down the Raiders. We're going to get into some controversial statements that Coach Prime made about his offensive line. Were they the right comments to make? Michigan, their sign stealing scandal takes another turn. They have rescinded Jim Harbaugh's recent contract offer, which would have made him the highest paid coach in the whole entire Big Ten. We also have some college football Week 10 takeaways and reactions. Georgia, Florida, Oregon, Utah, Kansas upset Oklahoma, and I got some interesting takes about the Bengals, Steelers, and the San Francisco 49ers before we get into it. Welcome. If you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we're not just a podcast. You can find us on all podcasting platforms, wherever you get your podcasts from. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. All you got to do is go to the link down in the comment section down below, and there will be the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. Also, leave us with a 5-star review. We will greatly appreciate it. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews before the end of this year. We currently are at 70 on Apple, and we're at 10 on Spotify. So if you want to listen to the audio versions of the podcast, make sure that you go ahead and give us a subscription on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. And lastly, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We post kind of like bonus content there. You can follow us on Instagram at JTSports_ and on Twitter at JTSports__. Let's get into it. The Lions take down the Raiders on Monday Night Football. Most of us are not surprised with the way this game went. The Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL, and the Raiders suck. All right, and I got a lot of things that I got to say about Las Vegas, all right? This team is 3-5, and I'm now starting to realize that Josh McDaniels is quickly becoming one of the worst head coaches in the National Football League. And I was trying to give him a little bit of the benefit of a doubt. You know, this was his second season. Last year, things didn't really quite go their way. And I was hoping that maybe this team would show some signs of improvement. But, you know, they lost to Tyson Badgett last week, which the Bears got blown out and embarrassed on Sunday Night Football a couple of nights ago. And in this game, the Raiders' offense sucked. And Josh McDaniels is supposed to be an offensive-minded coach. And if you specialize in a particular area of the ball, that area should not be the weakness on your team. This offense was abysmal. Jimmy Garoppolo barely was able to get over 100 yards passing. He was constantly overthrowing wide receivers. Jimmy G sucks, and Jimmy Garoppolo also is one of the worst quarterbacks in the National Football League based on how he's played this season, along with Josh McDaniels, who, along with Jimmy G, he may not be playing quarterback, but he's one of the worst in his area of expertise also. The Las Vegas Raiders made a giant mistake hiring Josh McDaniels. They were better on just going ahead and making Rich Bisaccia their head coach. Josh McDaniels took what was a playoff team and has pretty much tore it down to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. The Lions probably should have put 50 points on the Raiders tonight, but I guess the Detroit Lions were in the holiday spirit with Christmas only a couple of weeks away, and they felt like giving out the Raiders a couple of free extra possessions, because anytime you are winning the turnover battle 3-1 and you still lose by double digits, that's a pretty clear indicator that your team fucking sucks. And the Las Vegas Raiders are an abomination. And I feel for Raiders fans, okay, because you guys support this team year in and year out, and for it seems like 2 decades, this franchise has just slapped you in the face. Derek Carr was bad, but Jimmy Garoppolo is just as bad as what Derek Carr was, if not worse. And going from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo was pretty much it wasn't even an upgrade. It was pretty much a lateral move. Derek Carr has played the same way he's had his whole entire career with the Raiders and New Orleans, and Jimmy G looks even worse than he's ever had when he was playing for the 49ers. Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think is good enough to be a starting quarterback on about 28 to 27 of the other NFL squads that we have right now. He's a bottom tier starting quarterback. He's a fringe quarterback. And he's one of those QBs that you only bring in for 2 to 3 years as a bridge quarterback until you can find your franchise quarterback of the future. Jimmy G is not going to cut it as the long-term answer at quarterback for Las Vegas if people even thought he could be around for at least 2 to 3 seasons. He's injury prone, and even when he is healthy, he still sucks. The Raiders' defense played really well in this game. As a matter of fact, their defense kept them in this ball game. You had DeMarcus Peters pick 6, which pretty much made it a close game at one point. But outside of that, this game was never really close. And although the final score shows 26 to 14, the Detroit Lions left a lot of opportunities on the field in this game. If the Lions would have played their A game, they probably would have annihilated and embarrassed Las Vegas on national television. Detroit finally figured out how to get Jahmyr Gibbs going. They were lining him up, not just at running back, but also at receiver in the slot, something that many of us have been waiting all year long for. About damn time Ben Johnson figured out, hey, I got a weapon, not just a running back. Let me try to put him in more positions on the field. And we saw what Jahmyr Gibbs was able to do, not just on the ground, but also in the passing game for Detroit. This definitely was his breakout game. And I'm really interested in seeing how Jahmyr Gibbs continues to perform throughout the next couple of weeks with David Montgomery missing time with that injury. And when David Montgomery gets healthy, are we going to start seeing him use more as a receiver, or are they just using this as a one-off thing just until David Montgomery gets back healthy and then they're going to phase him back out of the offense? Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me why they've done that in the past, but right now they're feeding him the football and he had a really big performance tonight. But overall, I don't really have too many things to say about the Detroit Lions because the Detroit Lions are a good football team and they did what we expected them to do. They were what, an 8-9 point favorite in this game. I took Detroit to cover that. And the Las Vegas Raiders, man, this organization is just a complete mess. For some reason, they just always continue to take steps backwards anytime they take 1 or 2 small steps forward. And at this point, I think you might as well go ahead, throw in the towel, and just try to tank. I mean, Josh McDaniels probably isn't going to last too longer if the Raiders keep on losing. And what really is bugging a lot of people is the fact that no receivers that played in this game had any more than 2 receptions. We all saw Devontae Adams on the sidelines during the Raiders' final drive throw his helmet in frustration. Like, yeah, I'll be frustrated too, Devontae Adams, but you can't be too frustrated because you're the one who wanted out of Green Bay. And you're the one who wanted to get traded to Las Vegas. And although you expected to probably play out the rest of your career with Derek Carr being your quarterback, things didn't work out that way. You got Jimmy G. The fact that Jimmy G can't even utilize the best wide receiver in the National Football League, or one of the best at his position, shows you just how terrible this dude truly is. I don't know why Raiders fans thought that there was a small possibility that Jimmy G could be better than what Derek Carr was. That was just wishful thinking. We know what Jimmy G is. He's a fragile quarterback that can't stay healthy, and he's better off not playing than he is starting because he doesn't really give you a better chance to win than Aiden O'Connell or Brian Hoyer. Like somebody a couple of days ago when Jimmy G was injured asked Josh McDaniels, what's up with Aiden O'Connell? He was like, man, this ain't the preseason anymore. Well, I mean, what's the difference between what Jimmy Garoppolo is doing out there in the regular season and what Aiden O'Connell is capable of doing? I mean, people keep saying that Aiden O'Connell's ceiling is a high-end backup quarterback, maybe a low-end starter, but I don't really think that's too big of a difference from what Jimmy Garoppolo is right now. Jimmy Garoppolo is way worse with this organization than what he ever was with the 49ers. I mean, at least you could trust Jimmy Garoppolo to get over 100 yards. Having Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback is the equivalent to bringing a butter knife to a sword fight. So the Lions beat the Las Vegas Raiders 26-14 on Monday Night Football. Let me know what you guys think about this beatdown down in the comment section down below. And what are you expecting out of Las Vegas as we progress through the midway point of this year's NFL season? After UCLA beat Colorado, Coach Prime had some really choice words for the way his offensive line performed. So in the press game or post-game press conference, whatever they called it, they asked him, Coach Prime, how are you feeling about the performance of your offensive line? And this is what he had to say. And it was really interesting because many people were disagreeing with Coach Prime's method of the way that he went about calling out his offensive line. Many people felt like this is the kind of statements that you make when you want the team to turn on you. And I'm trying to get the video to load. Bear with me real quick. Here we go.
That's the picture. I'm going to paint it perfectly.
So basically, Coach Prime says that the picture is pretty clear what Colorado needs to do to get better on the offensive line, and that's simply get new linemen. And let's be honest, Coach Prime didn't say anything that most of us haven't been seeing behind closed doors for pretty much the whole entire season. The only difference is that in this situation, he chose to take the approach where he calls out his offensive line's poor performance publicly instead of maybe keeping it behind closed doors. And many people are split on Coach Prime's decision with how he went about calling out his offensive line's play. You got some people who agree with what Coach Prime said. He feels like this offensive line has played terrible and it's finally time to bring it to the forefront of everybody's attention and not try to be nice about this thing. And you got people out there that agree with that, and there's a good amount of people that disagree with this, thinking that Coach Prime calling out his offensive line in this manner is going to force this offensive line to not want to protect Shedeur Sanders. And I strongly disagree with that. That logic makes no sense. Listen, even if the guys starting on Colorado's offensive line have grown to dislike Coach Prime to the point where they don't want to protect Shedeur, they don't have a damn choice. You want to know why? Because a lot of these guys want to play in the NFL, and if they don't want to play for Colorado anymore, they at least want to put up some good film, so when they hit the transfer portal, other schools are going to want to offer them so they can come play for them next season if they don't want to be at Colorado. If you don't like Shedeur Sanders and you're allowing him to get hit, that's not going to do anything but just hurt your career. And I think that these players aren't as sensitive as what people may think. I definitely think that these players needed to be called out in this fashion because the offensive line has been dog shit. And there's no polite way to word that. And at the end of the day, I don't think that Coach Prime makes it all about his sons. Like, anytime they ask him about his sons after the game and the post-game press conference, he always says, it's not about my boys, it's about the team. Of course, on his Instagram page, he's going to show love to his sons because this is his personal Instagram platform. This is his personal page where he posts personal stuff, and his sons are very close to him. So, of course, he's going to give them a lot of love on his social media platforms, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have that same amount of love for his other players. At the end of the day, football is a team sport. And it doesn't matter if you have a great quarterback and Shedeur Sanders and a great safety and Shiloh Sanders if the other guys around them aren't doing their jobs. If Shedeur Sanders doesn't get good pass protection from the offensive line, you get the result that you got this past Saturday with him getting splattered all over the field and thrown around like a rag doll. UCLA has one of the best defensive lines in college football. We get that. But this offensive line didn't even look like they were trying. I don't get why people make it seem like it's a bad thing that Coach Prime is laying the hammer down, that these offensive linemen need to improve, or if they don't improve, they're going to find somebody else who can do better than what they have out there. There's something called tough love and tough coaching. You can't be a coach if you're a nice guy. You got to be able to give your players criticism when they need to be criticized. And this is one of these situations where you also got to take into account that his son is the quarterback. Shedeur Sanders was limping out there, and after how they played against UCLA, he may need to file for disability and possibly get a hover round. This offensive line cannot continue to play this way for the remainder of this season if Coach Prime wants Shedeur Sanders to eventually make it to the NFL, because he's not going to have too long of a career, because this is one of these offensive lines that potentially could result in you having a major injury with how bad they've played. Anybody that disagrees with the way that Coach Prime chose to call out his offensive line, let me ask you this. What do you feel was a better way he could have gone about this? Because obviously, this is his first time really outing his offensive line in the public like this. I'm pretty sure he's cussed out his offensive line plenty of times in the locker room. You can say, well, he's not doing a good job of coaching those guys up, and I will agree. Some of those sacks are due to miscommunication, missed assignments, and you also can say that Shedeur Sanders holds the ball too long at times. That's going to happen. He's trying to make a play. You have to try to hold the football long if you want to try to take shots downfield. At the end of the day, you can't put this on Shedeur Sanders while the offensive line is playing as bad as what it is. You got to put some of the blame on Coach Prime for hiring the wrong guys, his offensive line coach, and you got to put a lot of the blame on the guys who he's been starting out there. But guys have to execute, okay? And at the end of the day, when it comes to being a football coach, sometimes it's not about trying to soften the blow for your players. Sometimes you got to come at these guys in a tough way. Sometimes you might have to embarrass your players. But at the end of the day, as a football player, you can't get in your feelings about your coach calling you out in the public. If anything, that should motivate you to play better. And any of these players that gets in their feelings over what Coach Prime says, then they really shouldn't be playing for Colorado anyway, and they really shouldn't be playing football anyway. If you can't take some criticism from your head coach in the public for you being god-awful, then you don't have the mindset and the right mentality to be playing Division I college football. Go to NAIA or JUCO or Division II and have that mindset. Coach Prime is trying to win. He doesn't give a damn about your feelings at the end of the day. He's trying to find a way to put the best product on the field. And if you're not producing, he's going to let you know. We've seen plenty of coaches out their players for poor performance in the past. What's any difference between Deion Sanders doing it and Nick Saban or Kirby Smart or Jimbo Fisher or Dabo Swinney? Every head coach at one point has publicly outed a position group that hasn't played good. People are looking too deep into this. Like, I get why people kind of say that the Gen Z generation is kind of soft. And I'm going to be honest, I played with a lot of Gen Z players, and I have firsthand experience about how emotional these guys can get. I mean, in high school football, you have so many locker room divas that if they even get a little bit of criticism from the coach, they want to throw hands with them. These players, if they can't handle criticism from Deion Sanders, then they shouldn't be playing football at all. Life is 10% about what happens to you and 90% about how you respond. If I was any of those offensive linemen, I would take Deion Sanders' comments personally, and that would motivate me to want to become a better player. I find it hard to believe that these offensive linemen are just okay with being awful and okay with letting Shedeur Sanders get hit like that. And Shedeur Sanders never throws anybody under the bus. He always takes accountability. He always asks, what can I have done better? The people that are making it seem like Coach Prime was wrong for the way that he called out his offensive line probably are the same people that, if they have kids playing football, they're always complaining to the coaches how their son needs more playing time. There's not a nice or great way about being a head coach in a way that you can criticize your players in the nicest way possible and then produce at a high level still. Sometimes you have to really rip into guys to get the most out of them, and sometimes you got to take a soft approach to some of these guys. But at the end of the day, Coach Prime is one of those old school, hard-nosed coaches that he doesn't give a damn about your feelings if you're not out there producing. Of course, he's not trying to intentionally make you look bad. Of course, he's not trying to embarrass you. But if you're playing bad, you're playing bad. There's no way to sugarcoat that. How can you sugarcoat the message? What, you want him to continue to cuss out the offensive line behind public or behind closed doors? Come on, man. Some of us need to kind of realize the situation that Colorado's in right now with this offensive line. There's nothing nice that needs to be said about how this offensive line has played. Shedeur Sanders was getting crucified back there. UCLA had an all-they-can-sack buffet on Shedeur Sanders this past weekend. And that's his son back there, so of course, it's going to be a little bit more personal for Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders, before every game, what does he say? All we got to do is make sure that we can protect two and keep him upright. If we can do that, we got a chance to win this game. And I said before the season that there's not a single game on Colorado's schedule this year that they couldn't win as long as they could protect Shedeur Sanders. They lost to Oregon because they couldn't protect Shedeur Sanders. Now, of course, Oregon was a way better football team, but Shedeur Sanders didn't even have time to throw the football. He didn't have time to throw the football most of the game against UCLA. He was sacked on over 50% of his dropbacks. Do you know how difficult that is to play quarterback when nearly every time you get the football, you got somebody raining down on you? You can say he's holding the ball too long all you want to, but how fast are you supposed to get the ball out when as soon as you get the football, guys are coming in your face? You want this dude to get the ball out fast, like in 1.2 seconds? Who you think Shedeur Sanders is? The Flash? That's unrealistic. I think Coach Prime was right to call out his offensive line publicly the way that he did. Maybe that'll get those guys a little bit more motivated, because I just don't get how you can be this bad and just be okay with it and not want to play better. Now, of course, Deion Sanders needs to probably fire whoever that offensive line coach is, but I don't think he's wrong in this situation. And I think that the people that are saying that he's wrong and these players are not going to want to block for Shedeur, you're tripping and you're wrong. Any of these players that has any small amount of common sense will know that if they allow Shedeur Sanders to get injured, they're probably not going to play anymore for Colorado. They're going to have to hit the transfer portal, and they're going to have bad film out there that no other school is going to want to give them an opportunity. And if they're a graduate transfer or a senior, and this is their last hurrah in college football, they're not going to get drafted into the NFL. There's no reason why these players should be out here allowing Shedeur Sanders to get hit like how some people are suggesting. I mean, come on. I seen somebody on Instagram say, well, if that was me, I'll let him get hit a couple of times. Yeah, and guess what? You wouldn't be in the NFL, and nobody else would want you on their college football squad. And that's a loser mentality. Your coach calls you out. That should elevate you. That should get you locked in. That should get you motivated. And if you got a problem with it, fix it. You don't want the coach criticizing you and embarrassing you? Guess what you should do? Play better. It's not that hard to get these things. So I don't have any problem with Deion Sanders calling out his offensive line to the public. The Michigan sign stealing scandal takes another interesting plot twist. So apparently, Michigan has rescinded Jim Harbaugh's recent contract offer that would have made him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten Conference. And he, of course, came out and refuted these reports, said that these were false, nothing got rescinded, when obviously he's lying. Because why would the school want to give you an offer when you got this scandal going on? And of course, you don't have any clean hands in the situation. Obviously, you hired that guy, Connor Stallions, to go out there and do that, because there's no way you can be a head coach of a football program and not be aware of what's going on within your coaching staff. You can't be Jim Harbaugh and not know what Connor Stallions was up to unless you put him up to it. And if Jim Harbaugh really didn't have any idea of what was happening and what Connor Stallions was doing, then that kind of makes me look at him with the people's eyebrow and say, Jim Harbaugh, like, what the hell are you doing as the head coach that this even transpired on your watch? And of course, why would Connor Stallions do this for just no reason at all unless you told him to? You're the head coach. You have the final say in these things. Connor Stallions wouldn't do anything that you wouldn't know about, because, of course, he will go out, get people to attend the games, record the signs via their cell phones, and of course, what were they going to do with the information? How would it have been beneficial for your program if you, the head coach, didn't have access to the information? That just doesn't sound right. The stories just don't add up. That's like saying 1 + 1 = 4 in this situation. Jim Harbaugh, the head coach of Michigan, told Connor Stallions to go out and try to get an advantage. And of course, they're not the only program doing it. They're just the only program that went extreme is what they did with it. And plus, with them being as dominant as what they have been over the last 2 years, people are going to be more than likely wanting to turn them in. But if you are a Wolverines fan and you're trying to make it seem like this is being overblown, how is this being overblown? The school just took back his contract offer, a very lucrative contract at that. If you are still in denial about how severe this is, then at this point, you're just naive and you're just being overly biased. There's no way Jim Harbaugh didn't know this was happening, because why would Connor Stallions do this if it wasn't going to give Michigan any advantage? You just think that Connor Stallions was randomly buying tickets for all these games and having all these people attend these games and just getting this information not to use it? Who was he going to give the information to without Jim Harbaugh knowing? You mean to tell me that he'll give the information to the OC or the DC and Jim Harbaugh not know? People are being a little bit too naive about this. And if you believe that Jim Harbaugh has clean hands in this situation at all, I really don't know what to tell you, other than the fact that you're being overly biased about this. I believe that Jim Harbaugh is going to be coaching in the NFL next year. Now, there's been reports that have came out and said that any punishment that the NCAA hands to Jim Harbaugh, whether it be a fine or him having to miss games, the NFL is going to honor that. But what really surprised me is the amount of people that were talking about integrity. Why would anybody want to hire somebody that's getting caught in this messy of a scandal? I mean, Seattle hired Pete Carroll after the messy situation that he left at USC. Nobody cares. You want to know why? Because the NFL doesn't give a damn about integrity if you're able to win games. Look who is the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Come on, man. There's no way you can tell me Deshaun Watson had all those lawsuits by those masseuses and he didn't do a couple of wrongdoings to those masseuses or whoever was trying to get money out of him. Come on, man. There were literally like 20 plus of those people coming after Deshaun Watson. There's no way that he was completely innocent in all of those allegations. He did a little bit of dirt. The NFL doesn't care about integrity if you're able to come and win. Jim Harbaugh took the 49ers from bottom of the barrel, being irrelevant, to 3 straight NFC championships, plus a Super Bowl. I don't think that any team that hires Jim Harbaugh is going to care about what happened at Michigan all that much. So please stop with the whole woke nonsense about integrity. The NFL doesn't give a damn about integrity. We got people that beat on women and do all kinds of, non-excusable stuff, and they only get a slap on the wrist for it. 3-5 game suspension max. So don't come in here talking about why Jim Harbaugh shouldn't be an NFL coach if he's getting caught cheating, when the NFL is a league that doesn't really care too much about integrity. They care about money and results. And that's what Jim Harbaugh is going to bring. He's going to bring in results, which is going to lead to more revenue. This Michigan sign stealing scandal continues to get worse by the day. And I think Jim Harbaugh most likely is going to be on his way out. There's no way you can be a Michigan fan and just be so naive that Jim Harbaugh was just such an angel in this situation. He knew what was going on. And if he didn't, then it kind of makes me wonder just how good of a head coach this man truly is. Your head coach is your CEO. He should know everything that's going on amongst his coaching staff, especially when it comes to sign stealing. Because if this dude is stealing signs, who is he going to report the information to? Somebody has to be able to take advantage of it. Come on, man. Some people are just being a little bit too biased about this thing. It's okay. Like, you're a fan. You weren't the ones cheating, so why do you care? Why are people going so hard to try to defend Jim Harbaugh on this and try to defend Michigan? They're wrong. They got caught cheating. It didn't matter if everybody else is doing it. You got caught doing it. Michigan rescinded Harbaugh's contract offer for a very good reason. There are many people that are within that Michigan football program that are disgusted with these allegations. And that's not an opinion. You can go and you can read all the articles about how Michigan alumni aren't happy with the way that this scandal is turning out. Michigan wants to do things the proper way. They don't want to get caught cheating. Nobody wants to get caught cheating. Jim Harbaugh has his hands dirty just as everybody else who's involved in this. We need to stop being naive and just say that Jim Harbaugh's wrong on this. Obviously, he's going to deny this. You think Jim Harbaugh's going to come out and say, oh, yeah, like, we cheated. Come on, man. What? How many times have you ever got caught doing something you had no business doing and you just fessed up and said, oh, yeah, I did it? Come on. Jim Harbaugh, he's in the wrong on this situation. And I'm not even going to read the comments when I release this segment because I know there's going to be nothing but biased Michigan fans making excuses. You got caught cheating. There's nothing wrong with trying to cheat. You know what they say? If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. But this is a really serious matter. They rescinded his contract offer. They got the FBI involved. The Big Ten is launching their own investigation. Give me a break on this. It's all media, Jimbo Smimbo. Jim Harbaugh is about to be coaching in the NFL next year, whether y'all want to admit it or not. I would be extremely surprised if no NFL team hires Jim Harbaugh. And Jim Harbaugh kind of already had a little bit of a rocky relationship with the AD anyway. Jim Harbaugh is one of those people that he doesn't get along with everybody. He has one of those personalities that you either love him or you just hate his guts. I love Jim Harbaugh. He's quirky, he's unique, and he's different from everybody else. But you know, his hands are dirty. And if you don't think that Jim Harbaugh's hands are dirty in this situation, I don't know, man. I don't know. Honestly, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I honestly don't know what to tell you, man, because all signs point to Jim Harbaugh being guilty on this. How does he not know what members of his coaching staff are doing? You hire these coaches and you assign them a job. It's a difference if they're if they're paying players behind your back and things like that. But most head coaches know what's going on when it comes to operations within their football program that give them a competitive advantage. Georgia, to me, still looks like the best team in college football. Even without Brock Bowers, they still continue to dominate. One thing that always kind of confuses me with Georgia is that they can underplay to a team like Vanderbilt, who they're way better than, but then they can blow out Florida and Kentucky. One thing that I've always noticed about Georgia is that they always are ready when it comes to the big games, and they rolled Florida. This game wasn't even close. I mean, outside of the first two drives that Florida had, that's about all the success that Florida had in this game. Georgia's defense looked completely different than what it did against Vanderbilt. I don't know what Georgia does anytime they underplay their opponents. Maybe they don't try hard. Maybe they don't bring out their best plays. But it always seems like Kirby Smart has his team ready to play in big-time matchups like this one. And this was a very big game for Georgia, because they have a really tough November stretch. Like, they got to play Missouri coming up. They got to play Tennessee, Ole Miss. And this was the first true test that Georgia has received outside of their game against Kentucky, and they passed with flying colors. Carson Beck obviously was the better quarterback on the field in this game, and the wide receivers that he was throwing to in this game, they really stepped up. Dominic Lovett, transfer from Missouri, he had a big-time game. You had Ladd McConkey, who continued to make big play after big play in this matchup. You also had another wide receiver named Ra Thomas. Georgia's one of those programs that you just can never count out, because they always find ways to make up for what you think may be a limitation. Them not having Brock Bowers, we thought was going to be a major hurdle that they were going to struggle to overcome. And I don't think that anybody was wrong to believe that, because Brock Bowers is one of the best players in college football. Anytime you lose a player of Brock Bowers' stature, you just don't expect them just to roll a team like Georgia the way that they did. Graham Mertz has been playing some really good football up to this point this season. But I mean, this offense looked terrible. And it was so bad to the point that they had to run trick plays on 4th and inches. Did you not see that halfback toss that they tried to do with Trevor Etienne, Billy Napier, what was that? You got one of the best running back duos in the SEC. If you don't run that thing up the middle on 4th and inches, it doesn't matter how better Georgia is up front. If your offensive line can't open up enough holes for your running back to get just an inch to keep the drive alive, then I don't think those guys should be starting for you on the offensive line. If we can't pick up an inch, what are we doing on the O-line, man? I couldn't believe that shit. Georgia really took control of this game in the second quarter. After Florida did their little thing for the first 2 drives, like their first drive, Graham Mertz was looking like Tom Brady out there. And then after that, Georgia just was an avalanche. There just was nothing that Florida could get going. They couldn't get the run game going. Graham Mertz was getting harassed all afternoon. The receivers couldn't get open. And Florida's defense, oh my goodness. Austin Armstrong, I'm so disappointed with how this defense has performed under him. And I get that he's a young DC and this is his first year on the job and Florida has a lot of young guys out there. But this defense is starting to look just as bad as what it did under Todd Grantham. And I hate saying Todd Grantham's name because anytime I say it, I want to throw up. But this defense has not looked better. Anytime Florida goes up against top-notch competition, their defense gets shredded. They get carved up. They give up big chunks in the passing game. Florida needs a lot more talent on defense if Austin Armstrong is going to continue to be their defensive coordinator. For some reason, the Gators just can't seem to find a competent play caller on the defense side of the football. We get that Georgia was the more talented football team, but these are rivalry games. Auburn took Georgia to the wire. Auburn was expected to get blowed out by Georgia, and they nearly beat Georgia. They put 200-plus rushing yards on Georgia. Vanderbilt gave Georgia a more competitive game than what Florida was able to. Rivalry games are supposed to be close, regardless of talent. That's why they're called rivalry games. You throw the records out, you throw the past accomplishments out, and you focus on the game. If Auburn could give Georgia a close game and Vanderbilt could give Georgia a competitive game, why couldn't Florida do it? I mean, I get that. Maybe I was a little bit too high on Florida going into this game, and I definitely will admit that I was wrong taking Florida to cover in this game. But I at least thought that they could keep this thing close for the first half. The best they could do was keep it close for the first quarter. Or, I mean, come on, man. I just expect so much more out of Florida. I get that they have a lot of young pieces and a lot of young players who haven't really played in a lot of big-time games. But if Auburn, year one under Hugh Freeze, can give Georgia a competitive game, Florida probably could have done the same. You know, I just don't get this Florida team. It's like you played bad against Kentucky, but you were able to beat Tennessee. You play well against South Carolina and Vanderbilt, but you struggle against Georgia. You struggled against Utah. Anytime Florida plays good competition, they shrink. I really thought that Florida was starting to turn a little bit of a corner. Now, they still are a pretty solid football team. You know, they're like a middle-of-the-road SEC team, but that's just about what they've been the first 2 years under Billy Napier. You wonder when Florida's going to get out the middle of the pack and when they're going to elevate. Missouri has a better record than Florida. If Missouri is 7-1, there's no reason why Florida can't be playing at the same level that Missouri football is. It's just really disappointing if you're a Gators fan, just seeing Georgia go up and down the field on you at will. You know, like Florida, yeah, they may not have the same amount of talent as Georgia, but come on, man. Auburn took this team to the wire. If it wasn't for Brock Bowers, Auburn probably would have beaten Georgia. And this is just another example of how you can never doubt Georgia. Great teams find ways to overcome inefficiencies. They have been able to overcome not having Brock Bowers. And they're going to continue to do that. And I think they probably are going to win out. And even if they don't win out, I think at most they probably only suffer one loss prior to getting into the college football playoffs. Now, I don't know where that one loss is going to occur. It could occur against Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee, or it could occur in the SEC championship game against potentially LSU or Alabama. I don't know, but at this point, you just have to give Georgia the benefit of a doubt. Anytime they have certain limitations, they just find a way to overcome them. That's what great teams do. And this game was not even close. Outside of the first 2 drives, Georgia had this game in the palm of their hands. Oregon beat Utah in blowout fashion. The Utah Utes and the Pig Farmer, they couldn't get anything going offensively. And Oregon was a 6-point favorite in this game. And it really surprised me because they really should have been a double-digit favorite in this game. Oregon is one of the best teams in college football. I think that Oregon right now is the best team in the Pac-12, better than Washington. Although Washington has the head-to-head win over them, Oregon kind of shot themselves in the foot in that loss to Washington. If they play Washington again in the Pac-12 championship game, I like Oregon in the rematch. Oregon was just the far more superiorly more talented football team than what Utah was. And we know that Utah has been dealing with a lot of injuries. The quarterback, Cam Rising, their star QB, isn't going to be able to play this game. Their defense has a lot of injuries up front. And Utah, to their credit, with how good of a head coach Kyle Whittingham has, they've been able to overcome that. But eventually, you're going to run into a team that you just not having enough firepower and you trying to outcoach your way to a win just wasn't going to work. Anytime you have a team like Oregon that has a great quarterback led by a pretty good defense, and your offense has to revert to trickery to try to find ways to move the ball downfield, you're not going to be able to hang around a team that has a lead offense with a below average offense. I'm sorry. Yeah, they say defense wins championships, but offense has to be able to score points. And Utah couldn't do that. The Pig Farmer, Bryson Barnes, he came back to reality. Obviously, he had a great performance last week against USC, but USC's defense is poverty. They damn near lost the cow. Bryson Barnes had some really bad interceptions in this game. He just didn't look like the same quarterback that we saw in Utah's win over USC. And I don't think too many people expected for Utah to win this game, although they were playing at home. When you got an average to below average offense, and you don't really have great quarterback play, you can be able to hang around having a great defense. But even then, Utah's defense couldn't hold Oregon's offense. Bo Nix and company were going up and down the field on the Utes defense. And Utah has the best defense in the Pac-12. But when you got a bad offense that can't sustain drives and your defense has to continue to come on the field for more plays than what they should be on the field for, your defense is going to get tired out fast and you're going to give up a lot of points. And Oregon, their first couple of drives, they came out the gate swinging. I like Utah a lot. I still think that this is a very good football team, but when you play a team like Oregon, you got to have more than just trick plays up your sleeve to find ways to move the football. They had a really great play on special teams where it looked like the guy was going to bring it out and then he tossed it back to the other guy on the other side and it gave them pretty good field position. But even though they got pretty good field position because of that play, it didn't matter because the offense couldn't do anything with it. Utah's best drive in this game was their final possession before halftime, where they were able to put 3 points on the board and make it 6 to whatever it was. Oregon kind of took their foot off the pedal in the second half. I guess they didn't want to have to deal with any potential unnecessary injuries. Bucky Irving is one of my favorite running backs in the country. If he's eligible for the 2024 NFL draft, he's easily going to be my number 1 ranked running back. He has great vision, great contact balance. And Bo Nix, right now, I think he currently is leading the race for the Heisman Trophy. I don't care about what J.J. McCarthy is doing against nobodies. Bo Nix has been the most consistent quarterback in college football ever since he first arrived on campus at Eugene, Oregon. Oregon made the statement in their win over Utah that not only are they the best team in the Pac-12 currently, with the way Washington has been struggling with their previous opponents, but they are one of the 5 best teams in the nation, and I definitely think Oregon has a great chance to win it all. Kansas boomed the Sooners' perfect season. I don't think too many people saw this one coming. There were a good amount of people that felt like Oklahoma going on the road to play Kansas could result in this being a close game, but with no Jalen Daniels, I didn't think the Jayhawks had a chance in hell of being able to pull this off. But Oklahoma pretty much gifted this win to Kansas. They had several costly turnovers. Dylan Gabriel had a pick six early in this game. You had 2 costly fumbles, and Kansas was able to capitalize off Oklahoma's mistakes. The key to pulling off upsets in college football are pretty simple. Winning the turnover battle and being able to convert those turnovers into points. And that's what Kansas was able to do in this ball game. For Brent Venables, him being a defensive-minded coach, the way his defense has played the last 2 weeks, not just in their loss to Kansas, but also in their close win against UCF, his defense has not played at the same level that it was prior to them beating Texas in the Red River rivalry. Kansas didn't look like the better team at any point in this game than Oklahoma. The only way Kansas was really able to move the ball in this game was due to how good their running game was. And they got 2 outstanding running backs. Jason Bean had a big touchdown run, but throwing the football, he wasn't that great. He had some costly interceptions, and Kansas gave Oklahoma just as many chances to win this game as Oklahoma gave the Jayhawks. It's just that Kansas was able to capitalize late in the game when it mattered the most, and Oklahoma wasn't able to use that escape door ability that I say every good team in college football has. Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, anytime you think you have them beat, they just find ways to pull out close wins. Oklahoma doesn't have that same kind of ability. If they get into a close game, unless the other team just completely collapses on themselves, Oklahoma, more times than not, I don't think they're a good one-possession team. Oklahoma fans aren't happy with Jeff Lebby. They feel his offense is a little overrated. Dylan Gabriel at times in big moments of games, he can come through, but he also may cost you here or there. I think that for Oklahoma moving forward, they're still a pretty good football team, but I never felt they had a great chance to make it to the college football playoffs. This is a big win for Kansas. They lost 18 straight to Oklahoma prior to this win. I mean, the last time they beat Oklahoma, my grandma was a senior in high school. That's how long it was. Kansas just was able to capitalize off Oklahoma's mistakes. Oklahoma had plenty of opportunities to put this game on ice. Against Texas, Oklahoma played the best game of the year. That was like their Super Bowl, it looks like, because ever since then, they haven't had that same level of dominance. When you look at how Oklahoma has played over the last couple of weeks since their win against Texas compared to before they played Texas, the games weren't really that close. Some of those games took a while for them to kind of pull away in, such as SMU. But, I mean, they terrorized Arkansas State. The games weren't really close until they played Texas and got the win against them. So maybe that Texas win kind of altered their mindset and their mentality, and maybe this was the loss that they needed to kind of have them going back to the drawing board and kind of have them overthinking or rethinking some things. Oklahoma still has a chance if they went out to be in a college football playoff mix, but if they lose another game, which there's a strong possibility that they do, they play Oklahoma State in a couple of days. I think there's a very high chance they lose that game, and maybe they come out and they blow out Oklahoma State. But this just hasn't looked like the same team that we saw before they beat Texas. It seems like them beating Texas kind of was a curse because they haven't been the same football team ever since. Kansas, they're a 2-loss football team, and before the season, I picked Kansas to be in the Big 12 championship game. I didn't think that Oklahoma was going to be a better team than Kansas this year. One thing about Kansas is that they have a lot of experience. Even their backup quarterback, Jason Bean, he started in a couple of games. I see why they didn't want to allow him to transfer elsewhere. When he came back to Kansas, a lot of people were shocked because he's good enough to be a starter on majority of Power 5 teams out there. Jalen Daniels, he has a extensive injury history. So I see why Lance Leopold and that coaching staff wanted to have him back. Jason Bean, he's not a bad quarterback. He's a quality starter. In this game, though, I didn't really think he played all that well, but he did make some big plays and the big moments to keep this game close for Kansas to have the opportunity to go steal it. This has to be really disappointing if you're an Oklahoma fan. You got out to one of the best starts that you've had in recent memory, and you thought that maybe this was the year that you possibly could be in the mix to win it all. But this program, I just don't think that they've been playing great football the last couple of weeks, and they definitely needed this loss to give them a little bit of reality check. And we'll see how Oklahoma responds following this loss. Are they going to completely fall off the rails, or are they going to be able to shake back against Oklahoma State? Kansas, I think this win pretty much shows that this is a team that should be in contention for a New Year's Six bowl game. Their defense can be inconsistent at times, but this offense is good enough to put up a lot of points on you. This defense is not great, but they can get a couple of big stops and a couple of big takeaways here or there, and that's what Kansas did in this matchup, and that's why they won. You know, it's funny how Mike Tomlin always talks about never being complacent, right? But the Steelers, ever since 2010, when they lost to the Green Bay Packers in the Super Bowl that year, this franchise has been stuck in complacency and mediocrity. The Steelers, every single year, they're one of those teams that you know they're not going to be bad enough where they have a top 5, top 10 pick in the draft, but you know they're not going to be good enough to be anything better than a potential wild card exit in the playoffs. I love Mike Tomlin as a head coach. I think he's one of the best head coaches in the National Football League, but I'm now starting to lean towards the crowd that say that Mike Tomlin has to go. Listen, it's nothing wrong with having 9-8 seasons. I have a lot of respect for Mike Tomlin never having a losing season up to this point. But who really cares about going 9-8 every single season versus being a Super Bowl contender? I don't think that the Steelers are ever going to be able to win another Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin being the head coach. Kenny Pickett, he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Joe Burrow. And if Deshaun Watson wakes up and he bounces back, he's easily going to be the worst quarterback in this division. Even if Pittsburgh hires a better offensive coordinator, Kenny Pickett has a ceiling. His ceiling is top 12. For Kenny Pickett to be able to take you to a Super Bowl, you need to assemble one of the best rosters in the NFL. The Steelers have a very good roster. They got one of the best defenses in the NFL, but the offensive line is still lacking. The run game still isn't as consistent as what it needs to be. I don't think that Kenny Pickett is the guy to lead the Steelers to a Super Bowl. And you can say that maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh. It's too early in his career to say that. Look at the AFC right now. The AFC is the equivalent to the Western Conference in the NBA. The NFL's best quarterbacks, most of them reside in this conference. You think that Kenny Pickett is going to be able to outduel Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, or even Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert in the playoffs? No, unless he has a great team around him. Mike Tomlin is a defensive-minded head coach, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can still be a defensive-minded head coach and have a championship-caliber team, similar to Sean McDermott with the Buffalo Bills, but it looks like Mike Tomlin, he kind of has lost a little bit of his touch. I'm not okay with being happy with 9-8 seasons. Everybody that defends Mike Tomlin says he never has had a losing season. Okay, cool. But you're going 9-8. That's mediocrity. When you think about the history and the tradition of Pittsburgh Steelers football, you always think championship pedigree. One thing about Dallas Cowboy fans that, despite them being super obnoxious, that I've always respected about them is that they expect a championship caliber football team year after year. And they do have the talent to do so. The coaching just is never there. For the Steelers, though, they've had plenty of championship caliber rosters. Mike Tomlin never won a Super Bowl or even appeared in one when he had prime Big Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell. The closest Mike Tomlin has come to winning a Super Bowl since 2010 was when the Steelers got dragged in the AFC Championship by the New England Patriots when the Steelers were obviously a way more talented team than them. I love Mike Tomlin. Have nothing against the dude. He is a fantastic head coach, but I just feel like his time in Pittsburgh has come to an end, and I feel like the Steelers would be best suited parting ways with him. Going 9-8 is cool, but who wants to go 9-8 for every single season instead of being able to compete for a Super Bowl? I hate saying that, oh yeah, like, we're not going to be good enough to win a Super Bowl, but at least we're going to have a winning record because of how good of a coach Mike Tomlin is. I'd rather take a couple of down seasons and win a Super Bowl than constantly be a mediocre team. If the Steelers make it to the playoffs this year, which I think they got a good chance of being able to do so, they won't be anything more than a 7th or 6th seed at best, and they're probably going to get eliminated in opening weekend, and they're probably going to get blown out. Yes, you do need to have a great defense to win a Super Bowl, but you can't win a Super Bowl with the elite defense and an average at best, below average most of the time offense. This isn't the 80s or the 90s or even the early 2000s anymore. You're not going to be able to win with a Joe Flacco or a Jimmy G kind of quarterback if you don't have a great offensive personnel around them and you don't have a great play caller. You need to have a serviceable offense to be a threat to win the Super Bowl, and I don't think that Mike Tomlin is capable of being able to put that on the field. The Steelers haven't had a good offensive coordinator ever since Todd Haley left out the door, and Todd Haley never should have gotten the boot. The reason why he got the boot was because he didn't get along with Ben Roethlisberger. You go from Todd Haley to Randy Fichtner. Randy Fichtner wasn't good. Steeler fans wanted him gone. And then you go and you get Matt Canada, who a lot of people could have told you prior to him even ever calling plays at the NFL level, his offense wasn't going to work. Mike Tomlin just seems to be having this franchise in a complacent state. And it's really ironic because he's one of those coaches that always preaches about never being complacent, always wanting more, not being okay with being average or mediocre. But that's all the Steelers have been the past decade. I've been a Steelers fan since 2009, 2010. I was in third grade around that time. And ever since those 2010 years or the early 2010 years, the Steelers have never been a team that I've told people, yeah, we got a great chance to win the Super Bowl. Even with us having Antonio Brown, Big Ben, and Le'Veon Bell, I thought we had a chance, but I never thought we'd be able to beat a team like New England because New England is always more well coached than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I used to get really upset when people used to knock Mike Tomlin for not having the Steelers buttoned up in big games. And I used to get really defensive over it. But now with me being over, I'm just a realistic fan at this point. I know what Mike Tomlin is, a great coach whose time has kind of run out with this organization. The Steelers have had the luxury of not really having to do a lot of head coaching searches. They've only had a handful of head coaches in the history of their franchise, and they're a patient organization. But eventually, when does the patience run out? When do you take a stand and you say, you know what, we're tired of being 9-8. We're tired of having early exits in the wild card round. I'm still not over when the Steelers lost to Blake Bortles and the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. I still would never get over that. I don't care about it not being on Mike Tomlin. This is the same dude who lost to the Cleveland Browns when Kevin Stefanski was out with COVID. He lost to an interim head coach in the playoffs. I'm just a little bit over Mike Tomlin. Don't have anything against the guy. I don't want anybody of my skin color making it seem like I'm Uncle Ruckus and I'm joining the other crowd. Don't make it like that. Okay, please don't go there with me because I have plenty of receipts about me defending Mike Tomlin. We got to stop having so much love for Mike Tomlin because of his history with Pittsburgh. The dude hasn't won a Super Bowl in a decade. Philadelphia moved on from Andy Reid, and they went to 2 more Super Bowls after that. Okay? Nick Sirianni took them to a Super Bowl. Doug Peterson took them to a Super Bowl. I'm tired of Steelers fans that defend Mike Tomlin, making it seem like we need to be okay with 9-8 every single season. We're tired of that shit. The Steelers are one of those franchises that should always expect to compete for a Super Bowl year after year after year. Early wildcard exits aren't tolerable anymore. Losing to the Jaguars in 2017, I'm still not over that. Does that not bug y'all? I know y'all still have to have a little bit of hurt because of Jacksonville going on the road to Heinz Field and just rolling over Pittsburgh. The Steelers need to move on from Mike Tomlin. They're never going to win anything with him being the head coach anymore. Same thing with Kenny Pickett. I didn't like the Kenny Pickett the Kenny Pickett draft pick. Just being honest with you. I wanted Malik Willis. Malik Willis had way more upside than Kenny Pickett. Although Malik Willis hasn't been good and he most likely isn't going to be a starting caliber quarterback in the league, I feel like in a different situation, maybe he could have been better. Kenny Pickett just needs way too much to be a good quarterback against the Jacksonville Jaguars. He overthrew George Pickens on a corner route. He missed Deontay Johnson when he was wide open in the end zone. He overlooks wide open receivers. Kenny Pickett is going to get better when the Steelers move on from Matt Canada, but he's not going to go from what he is right now to one of the best quarterbacks in the league. When he was coming out of Pitt, his comparison that most people gave him was a worse version of Joe Burrow, a great value brand version of Joe Burrow. And anybody that is remotely 30% or 40% of Joe Burrow is a solid quarterback. But being a solid quarterback in the AFC isn't going to equate to you winning a lot of championships. There just are way too many more talented quarterbacks in this conference for the Steelers to be trying to win with a Kenny Pickett. Look at the AFC North Division. The Ravens have Lamar, arguably top 3, top 5 quarterback in the game right now. Same thing with Joe Burrow. The Steelers have a mediocre quarterback and a coach that, although he's not mediocre, he has his franchise stuck in a state of mediocrity and complacency. And the Steelers faithful that defend Mike Tomlin have become complacent. Your expectations have tapered. Your expectations have went down. Since when has the Steelers fan base ever been okay with not being able to win Super Bowls? The standard has always been championships. What does Mike Tomlin say? The standard is the standard, and the standard should never change. Expectations should never go down. Well, the expectations have went down for the Mike Tomlin faithful out there. For the Mike Tomlin fan club, everything that Mike Tomlin has preached, he kind of has looked like a hypocrite. And you kind of look like a hypocrite defending it. Sure, the guy is good at getting players to believe in themselves, and he can give you a great rah-rah speech to get you turned up for the game. But is that equating to Super Bowl wins? No. So at the end of the day, who cares about him never having a losing season? Him never having a losing season doesn't outweigh him having more championships. I'll take a head coach that has 3-4 losing seasons that can give me 2 Super Bowls, such as Tom Coughlin. Mike Tomlin I think his time with Pittsburgh has run its course. I would love for Pittsburgh to move on from Mike Tomlin. I know it sounds hard to hear this coming out of me, somebody who has defended Mike Tomlin for all these years, but the Steelers losing to the Jaguars is where I reach my wits' ends. Him keeping Matt Canada, not firing this dude is where I reach my wits' ends. Him having them signing Mitch Trubisky before they even drafted Kenny Pickett was the breaking point for me. I was so upset when the Steelers signed Kenny Pickett. And I couldn't believe that there were a small group of people who thought that, or not Kenny Pickett, but when they signed Mitch Trubisky. And I was really upset that there was a small group of people that thought that Mitch Trubisky could shine in Pittsburgh. And there's a small group of people that are holding out hope that Mike Tomlin is going to be able to get the Steelers back to a championship level. No, he's not. He just doesn't have the competence to assemble a great offense. He doesn't even know how to assemble a great staff. Great head coaches get the dudes under them opportunities. When's the last time Mike Tomlin hired a coordinator that got interviewed to be a head coach? Mike Tomlin he doesn't have it anymore. He's a good coach, but he probably would do better with a different franchise. He just needs a reset, and I think the Steelers need a reset for Mike Tomlin. Need to go out there and spread their wings, but if you're somebody who just continues to defend Mike Tomlin, you're defending mediocrity, and your expectations have went down. The Steelers went from a perennial Super Bowl contender to being a contender for a wild card spot. There were people this season who thought that the Browns could finish above Pittsburgh. When has that ever been acceptable? When has continuing to go 9-8 and losing a wild card continued to be acceptable? I remember when Tim Tebow in overtime hit Demaryius Thomas for the game-winning touchdown. I was in 5th grade. I still have nightmares about that. I remember I was in a room thinking the game was over, and then a couple of minutes later, my grandpa, he says, "Hey, JT, come here. Watch this." Tim Tebow drops back with that ugly-ass throwing motion, cocks it all the way back, hits Demaryius Thomas on the sideline. Demaryius Thomas running upfield. R.I.P. the DT, by the way. Running upfield. Stiff-arming old man Ryan Clark and old man Troy Polamalu. Game-winning touchdown. Steelers get upset. Broncos move on and get squashed by the Patriots. And then losing to the Browns. The Browns with no Kevin Stefanski. Mike Tomlin got out-coached by an interim head coach. And then, I'm still not going to get over that Jacksonville Jaguars L in divisional round coming off a bye. Even then, before that, getting smacked by the New England Patriots in the AFC Championship game. How do you people that defend Mike Tomlin continue to go off the fact that he's never had a losing season? He may not have ever had a losing season, and that's cool, but is he ever going to be able to get this organization over the top again? I don't think so. I don't believe in Mike Tomlin anymore. Cool, he can get us to 9-8, maybe 10 wins, but what the hell does that mean in the big frame of things? We go to the wild card round, we get blowed the hell out by Kansas City, or we get blowed the hell out by Buffalo. The Steelers just aren't a good enough team to compete with any of the best teams in the league in the postseason for a full 4 quarters with a below average offense. You can go turn on a Steelers game, and anytime the offense comes on the field, you can walk out, get you something to eat, get you a drink of water, use the bathroom, come back, and the defense is right on the field. You're never going to miss anything. You want to know why? Because the offense stinks. And Mike Tomlin, I think he stinks too. As far as him being a head coach in Pittsburgh, this franchise is mediocre. And to be quite honest with you, I'm just tired of the damn mediocrity. Let's move on from Mike Tomlin and let's find a different quarterback than Kenny Pickett and try to find a way to get back to the championship level that Steelers football used to be. You know, many people in the media are writing off the 49ers and Brock Purdy because they've lost 3 straight games. And I get that things don't look pretty for the 49ers right now. They just lost 31-17 to the Cincinnati Bengals. Brock Purdy had another turnover-ridden game, but I still think the 49ers are still one of the best teams in the NFL. That may be crazy to believe, but I'm one of those people that I don't make judgments of what a team is until after Thanksgiving. And we're going to find out a lot about the 49ers when they come off their bye. They still have one of the best rosters in the NFL. They're dealing with some injuries, and Brock Purdy is kind of in a little bit of a cold spell. Anytime I watch a 49ers game and I watch Brock Purdy play, even when he struggles, he still doesn't have any bad games that make me think, oh yeah, he's Jimmy Garoppolo 2.0. His first bad performance, which came against the Cleveland Browns, that was the worst performance of his career up to this point. Against Minnesota, he looked pretty good until the final couple of drives where he threw that interception that pretty much sealed the game for Minnesota. And last week against Cincinnati, he was on fire. He was accurate, making great decisions with the football. Tony Romo was gazing and jacking off Brock Purdy all throughout that Cincinnati Bengals broadcast, just praising his decision-making, his ability to find receivers open, throwing with anticipation, throwing guys open. Outside of the 2 interceptions that he threw, which the first one that he threw inside the red zone kind of was just a great play on Cincinnati's part. Brock Purdy was trying to make something happen, and there was a defensive player there that just happened to make a play and take the football away from him. And then the second interception that he threw, I believe it was to Logan Wilson, that was just a completely bad read on his part. But outside of those 2 interceptions, Brock Purdy looked lights out against Cincinnati. Brock Purdy is going to be fine. Stephen A. Smith came out on First Take and said that he doesn't believe in Brock Purdy anymore. There's people saying that the 49ers are frauds, they're a disaster. No, they're not. People are overreacting. We need to stop overreacting to teams this early into the season. It's the midway point. The 49ers have some injuries. They're banged up. You got 49ers fans who are calling for Steve Wilks to get fired when this is still a top 10 defense. They're still a top 10 in yards per game allowed, points. Yeah, this defense has had a slight drop-off, but you went from Robert Saleh to the Miko Ryans. You were blessed to have 2 great defensive coordinators who are now head coaches. You're not going to be able to continue to find head coach-worthy defensive coordinators. Steve Wilks is doing an okay job. I don't think he's doing a great job. Some of his play calls have been a little controversial at times, and he does tend to be a little bit overly aggressive in moments where he shouldn't be. But this offense kind of is the heart and soul of this team. Steve Wilks isn't the reason why the 49ers are 5-3 right now. Kyle Shanahan is too. The play calling hasn't been great. Brock Purdy hasn't been playing great. The 49ers just are in a little bit of a cold spell. But I'm not going to write them off just because they're going through a little bit of adversity. Every championship caliber football team has to go through a little bit of adversity. And I never thought that the 49ers were going to be in contention to win the 1 seed. I always felt it was going to come down to either the Philadelphia Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys, or maybe the Detroit Lions. I didn't even have the 49ers winning the NFC West this year, and I caused a lot of controversy, and a lot of 49ers fans came at me sideways for saying I was overrating Seattle. But Seattle, even though Geno Smith has taken a step back, they still have a way more complete team than you. They got talent on the secondary. They got talent on the defensive line, and they got way more depth than what you have. And that's something that I think is kind of hurting the 49ers, that they don't have great depth. Seattle has depth at receiver. They got depth on the offensive line. They got depth at running back. Meanwhile, Chris McCaffrey, he goes down, you're a completely different team. Deebo Samuels goes down. Your offense takes another hit. Brock Purdy is a solid quarterback, but he's not one of those quarterbacks that's going to be able to carry you week after week and overcome you having some injuries or some limitations. And I'm not going to say that Brock Purdy is Jimmy Garoppolo 2.0 because he's not. Brock Purdy is a way more efficient and a way more just overall better quarterback than what Jimmy G ever was for the 49ers. He can get outside the pocket, buy time for receivers to get open. He can pick up yards with his legs. He had a really amazing throw to Brandon Ayuk where he threw the football across his body to the opposite side of the field, something that you should never do if you're a quarterback. He was serving out there. Although Joe Burrow was dotting up this Steve Wilks defense, he completed his first 19 passes in this game. You definitely don't want to see that. But sometimes that just happens when you're going up against a great quarterback like Joe Burrow. I just believe that counting out San Francisco, a team that has this good of a roster, has a really good head coach in Kyle Shanahan, and a solid quarterback in Brock Purdy, because I believe Brock Purdy has been a top 10 quarterback based on his play this season. People make it seem like it wasn't too long ago where people were saying how he was the front runner to win NFL MVP over Chris McCaffrey. But anytime a player starts to kind of have a little bit of a cold streak, the media turns on them and People went from claiming the 49ers are the best team in the NFC to now making it seem like they're just a complete shit show and they're going to be a disaster. Like, calm down. Let's just slow our horses on trying to ride off the 49ers. I have a saying that the real football season doesn't start until after Thanksgiving. That's where the pretenders separate themselves from the contenders, and that's when the contenders start to get really hot. We've seen plenty of seasons when the 49ers have gotten out to a hot start and they go a little bit cold and then they pick things up during the latter half of the season. The 49ers are a November, December kind of team. I was even surprised that they started out to the start that they got. I'm not surprised that they're 5-3 right now. I'm surprised with the fact that they've lost 3 games consecutively the way that they had. I never thought that they would go throughout the season having a big losing streak like this. But this is still a really good football team. The 49ers don't need to have the #1 overall seed to make it out of the NFC. They got the talent, they got the coaching staff, and they got the quarterback to be able to go toe-to-toe with any team in the NFC on their best day. Turnovers can be fixed. Brock Purdy just has a couple of bad plays and 1 or 2 moments of the game that kind of alter it. Outside of that, the dude looks rock solid. He looked really good against Cincinnati, minus the 2 interceptions. Jimmy Garoppolo, he had games where he just looked awful. There was no way to kind of say his performance was good in certain situations. There were playoff runs where the 49ers literally carried Jimmy Garoppolo, not asking him to throw the football all that much. You can trust Brock Purdy way more than you can trust Jimmy G. Brock Purdy, I think some of his mistakes come from him just trying to do a little bit too much. Jimmy Garoppolo, his mistakes just came from him just not being good, him overthrowing wide receivers. I don't see Brock Purdy have too many bad overthrows. He may miss a wide receiver here or there, but Brock Purdy is really accurate. He's a really good decision maker. I've never seen a game outside of his performance against Cleveland where he just completely was awful. I'm not getting the Jimmy G comparisons. Yeah, against Minnesota, he costed them the game, but I felt he played good against Cincinnati, minus the interceptions. I think that the 49ers are going to be okay. If you're a 49ers fan, you don't need to hit the panic button. I understand that you have high expectations, but you're going to be fine. You're going to get to the playoffs. You have nothing to worry about. What you do in the playoffs, okay, that's a different conversation for another day. But I still believe in the 49ers. I still believe that this is a team that's good enough to make it out of the NFC. And I'm not understanding why people are starting to turn on them and make it seem like they're just falling apart, like they're headed downhill. They're going to correct things. Kyle Shanahan is way too good of a head coach for this team to not even be a playoff team. When you think about the teams that have the best shot at making it out of the AFC right now, many people are talking about the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Jaguars, but Cincinnati is getting overlooked. And I get it. Cincinnati, they started out 0-2. Joe Burrow got out to a really nightmarish start due to that calf injury. But boy, the way Joe was playing against the San Francisco 49ers, I believe that the Cincinnati Bengals are back, people. And you got to remember that the Bengals are never one of those teams that starts the season out hot. Their last couple of seasons, they've gotten out the slow starts. This is around the time during the season that the Cincinnati Bengals start to hit their stride. They beat a really good San Francisco 49ers team, and they right now currently have a 3-game win streak. The Bengals are still legitimate contenders to make it out of the AFC. If Joe Burrow continues to play the way that he did against the 49ers for the rest of the season, the Bengals are going to be right back in the conversation to make it out of the AFC. Joe Burrow right now is the only quarterback active in the league that has a playoff win against Patrick Mahomes. He did this being able to beat Kansas City on the road in Arrowhead. Not too many people have been able to accomplish that feat. Joe Burrow in his second season took the Bengals to the Super Bowl despite having the worst offensive line to ever make it to the history to ever make it to the Super Bowl since what? Roger Staubach with the Cowboys? When they went to the Super Bowl behind the trash offensive line? Do not count out Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. When you're discussing teams that have a chance to win the AFC, the Bengals need to be in that discussion. They always have been a team that starts out slow out the gate. They're one of those teams that starts to separate themselves in the month of November. They still got arguably the best quarterback in this division. At least, it depends on who you ask. Some people would tell you Joe Burrow is better than Lamar. Some people would tell you that right now Lamar Jackson has played better than Joe Burrow. But it doesn't really matter because both of these two quarterbacks are top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now based on how they've performed. Cincinnati has a really good defensive coordinator in Lou Anarumo, who's going to be a head coach somewhere next season. And their offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan, he was getting head coaching interviews. The recipe to the teams that have the most success in the playoffs isn't just about having the better overall roster. It's all about having a good coaching staff as well. Cincinnati, they're well coached on defense. They can get after you. This offensive line had their best performance all season against the 49ers. The Bengals have invested way too much money into the offensive line over the past 2 years for this offensive line to not be able to finally play at the level needed for Cincinnati to win it all. They signed Orlando Brown at left tackle. They paid him a really big salary in free agency. I believe that Orlando Brown really was the missing piece to solidify this offensive line. As long as Cincinnati can overcome significant big injuries on the O-line and they can keep everybody healthy, this is a team that can make a deep playoff run. That's the only thing that's held them back. We know that Joe Burrow is capable of being able to beat Mahomes on the road. He shouldn't be doubted. I'm not hearing too many people talk about Cincinnati in terms of them being able to make it out of the NFC. And I believe over the next couple of weeks, when Cincinnati continues to win games and they eventually end up being in contention for the 1 seed along with the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Jags, people are going to start hopping back on the Joe Burrow and Cincinnati Bengals fan club. But remember, the Bengals were my preseason pick to win it all this season. I got them beating the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl. And right now, Seattle looks better than the 49ers at this point. The Bengals are starting to come along. Now, I didn't expect for them to start 0-2. I didn't expect for Joe Burrow to look that bad to start the season. The Bengals just happen to be one of those teams that starts the season out slow and they get better as they progress every week throughout the season. The Bengals, I think they need to get talked about a little bit more in terms of teams that could make it out of the AFC. Now, are they up there with Kansas City and the Ravens? Can you make an argument for them being the best team in the NFL right now? No, you can't, but I think that's going to change over the next month. Around this time, at the end of November, I promise you that we're going to start having the conversation about, can the Ravens or the Bengals win the AFC? Watch, it's going to come. People just pay attention to the teams that are the hottest and have the best record. The Bengals don't have the best record right now. They're 4-3, but they're on a 3-game win streak, and not too many people are giving the Bengals the attention that they deserve, considering the fact that they have the only quarterback in the AFC that has proven to have the ability to lead his team to a win over Mahomes on the road in Arrowhead. It was called Burrowhead for a reason. I'm just saying, don't write off, don't overlook Cincinnati. They definitely are still in the conversation to make it out of the AFC this year, and I'm still riding with them to win. Somebody hit me up the other day in my DMs on Instagram. Make sure that you guys go ahead and follow me, JT_Sports_. He said, JT, you predicted Cincinnati to win the Super Bowl. That's not looking so good right now. Who is your new Super Bowl pick to make it out of the AFC? I said, I'm still rolling with the Bengals. And this is coming from a Steelers fan. And I love Lamar Jackson. But Joe Burrow, one thing that he's always proven is that in big games and the big moments in the playoffs when the lights are the brightest, he's going to come through 9 times out of 10. I'm not writing off the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think that this team is still a top contender in the AFC conference. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We're going to go live Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday after Thursday night football because the Steelers play the Tennessee Titans. So make sure that you have post notifications turned on. If you didn't know, right next to the subscribe button on the right, there's a bell icon. If you tap it, it will have the option for you to get alerted every time I upload a new video or make a post. So if you miss the live streams and the content isn't showing up in your subscription feed, make sure that you have the post notifications turned on so you don't miss a new upload. Most importantly, listen to the JT Sports Podcast. Rate us 5 stars. We're available on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon. Every episode of the podcast is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another episode.